guys, Kate here from Rise and Shine Wood Signs. Today we're going to be working with a DIY wood sign, the stencil all guests must be approved by the dogs. So we're going to go ahead and show you what exactly is in the kit when you purchase one from us here at Rise and Shine. So first let's start off with the wood sign. This is a 12 by 16 wood sign, 3/4 inch wood. It is a very nice piece of wood. It's not cheap by any means. It's very well made, and this is the whitewash finish that you will be using. Of course, the stencil, it has the stencil film. It already has the transfer tape applied to the stencil for you to use. Of course, the wood frame. This is a black stain that the client have requested to go along with it. You will receive your brushes. This client only requested black as their color, and then you will also receive Mod Podge to go along with your DIY sign. You will receive a pick for you to use working with the stencil material. Of course, a squeegee. When you get your stencil, you want to go over it, but we'll go over that here in just a minute. And then, of course, you will be getting a small razor blade with your kit. This, please be aware of if you do have small children in the area or in the house where you're going to be working, so just make sure to put this up for safety precautions. But this little handy guy will actually slip it out of the covering right at a moment. But this is actually to go over the painting. If you have any type of bleeding on the edges, this just helps clean up those edges, because stencils are not always foolproof. They do a really good job, and we try to make sure that we send out quality products to you, but sometimes stencils do have a tendency to bleed just a little bit here and there, so we want to make sure that your sign is perfect and you're happy with your finished product. So let's go ahead and get started. First, what we're going to do is we want to center up our stencil on our sign. Now, when you guys receive your signs at home, you will already have your frame already attached to your wood sign. So this will already come pre-done for you. So I just want to show you exactly what you will be getting in the kit. This is what your sign will look like when it comes all together. I will have this cut and measured out for you so it fits perfectly into the frame. For this particular project, I'm doing it here for the client. She had requested that it was completed for her. So I'm going to go ahead and move those out of the way. But for you, of those at home following along, we're going to center up our stencil on the actual mat. So this, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to grab my pick, and what I'm going to do, step one, is we want to pull back a little bit of this material. This is the backing of the stencil. As you can see, as I pull it away, the stencil material is exposed. So what we want to do is we don't want to expose too much of this stenciling right off the bat, because if you stick it onto the board, sometimes what you can do is lose pieces. So what we want to do is we want to fold it just a little bit right above there, so we maybe expose about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of the stencil, so that way if we do get it on the board and we need to move it or reposition it, we can easily pick it up and it won't harm the design of the stencil. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to get that lined up. We're going to press that about that 1 inch down, okay? And like I said, these should come perfectly cut and aligned for you when you get them in your kit, so that's not a problem. Also, what I would highly recommend is taking your squeegee and going over the design and downward and then side to side motions to make sure that the stencil is completely adhered. And that way, if it was extra cold when it was shipping, maybe the stencil separated from the transfer tape a little bit, we want to make sure that's completely done or completely adhered. So now what we're gonna do is we are gonna flip this up just a little bit. I'm gonna expose just a little bit more of the stencil. For those of you that are advanced, you can actually pull this down a little bit further. But for those of you who are just starting out and maybe this is your first time doing a DIY sign, just pull it down maybe a couple of inches and we'll work from there. Now, you'll notice maybe in your instructions that you received, I said to make a C shape with the design, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. So we're gonna just push this down all the way down, okay? So now that's down. Now we're gonna do the same exact thing. We're gonna pull a little bit more. Now, if you happen to get a stencil that maybe has little bitty tiny pieces, and let's say it's sticking to this and not to this, what you can do is actually push this down and then just rub it so it will stick to the stencil and you'll have absolutely no problems. So I'm gonna go down just a little bit further because I feel pretty confident that I can make this happen. So this is where if you have more of this exposed, the backing is still on up here, we're going to roll this into a C formation, and we're gonna kind of look at it because we don't wanna push it down. We don't wanna just stick it down flat because then you tend to get air bubbles, and that's no fun. So we wanna make sure that we're pushing it down, okay? And you can even run your squeegee back over all of this just to make sure that it is completely done. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna be brave and pull the rest of this backing off, okay? So all the rest of the stencil is fully exposed. I'm gonna still continue to work in that C pattern and push all of my stencils down. And really, I wanna emphasize that not just pulling it off and trying to stick it on there and ripping it back up, you're really gonna not be happy with your results in the end, and you will run the risk of destroying the stencil. So please just work in small sections. Okay, like I said, again, we're gonna go back and forth, up and down. You can even do diagonal if your heart so desires. Okay, so now your stencil's on your board. No problems there, okay? So now we have what we're left with is our stencil film and transfer tape. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our pick, and I'm gonna separate the two of these here together. And I'm gonna start pulling at a diagonal downward motion. So you really do not want to pull up, because what that can do is that can actually tend to lift some of the stencil material up and away from it. So we're just gonna pull downward at a diagonal motion. And if you want to, you can even run your fingers along the edges, especially if you have smaller pieces. Running your fingers along the edge tends to keep things in place a little bit. And it also just helps keep the stencil down. If there are any little air bubbles that may have a tendency to get lifted up, we're gonna go ahead and take care of those. No problems. This one is working beautifully, as yours will at home. Okay, so now we've gotten our corner. Now we've gotten our full diagonal. We're just gonna start working, pulling the top down. We still have a diagonal angle, okay, but we're just pulling this top piece down. Still working. Everything looks great so far, no problems. Okay, still working that little bit of a diagonal angle, pulling it off completely. Ta-da! Your stencil is now on your board. Now it's ready to go, it's ready to paint, and we're ready to get going. I'm making this DIY sign all for you. All right, so again, I am just running my fingers over the edges. I wanna make sure that there's no air bubbles around the letters or anything of that nature. Everything looks good, secure, no problems. I will tell you the biggest point of working with a stencil material. I want to just point this out really quickly. Do you see the points and the tips of these M's? The round pieces, not so much, but you have these little bitty notches up here and the little bitty tips. When we talk about this in the brushing techniques later on in the video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But you really don't want to run the brush this way towards what you want to try to go with the material when you're painting, because otherwise what happens is paint can get underneath those little bitty corners and it can lift them up, and then you get a really unclean, uncrisp line. So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to dip our brush in our Mod Podge. We're just going to get a little bit. We don't need a lot. It's okay. And what we're going to do is we're just going to dab over the top. And we're just going to kind of brush this. This is your Mod Podge. We are brushing this over the letters. This is really going to help seal your stencil onto the board. This is not always necessary, but I would highly recommend it for new beginners who have never worked with a stencil material before. If you have and you feel comfortable without using the Mod Podge, by all means, do whatever you would what makes you feel comfortable. Okay, so I'm just kind of dabbing up and down. I'm not really taking a heavy-handed approach. This is kind of, think of it as like a little kindergarten girl with her crayons. She's just coloring and painting very dainty, being very dainty with the brush. Okay, so here we come to this M. So we're just gonna kind of go over it, and I'm gonna work up, and then I'm gonna work down, okay? And the trick is with Mod Podge is you don't wanna have a bunch of, you wanna go over it and make sure that it's smooth, because you don't want a bunch of globs in the paint or on the board as the Mod Podge dries. So when you do like an M, go over it and then go over it again very lightly. You really don't want big clumps of Mod Podge to dry, because what will happen is you will see that in your paint in the end product, and we do not want that. That is not gonna look good. So we're just gonna continue to go over these. Okay, I'm gonna finish the Mod Podge, and then I will be right back with you when we are ready to start painting. Hey, we're back and ready to get painting. So I will say that if you would like to do 2 coats of Mod Podge on your board, if you're working with someone, let's say like a child or someone that has less than a steady hand, feel free to do 2 coats of Mod Podge. It is not gonna hurt the final product at all. But if you feel like you can do this with enough finesse and a light hand, don't worry about it. 1 coat will be more than enough. All right, let's get painting. So we're gonna grab our second brush. Please do not try to use your Mod Podge brush and rinse it off. And then, oops, I've been using this one already and I just grabbed it. So if you're going to save your Mod Podge brush for later, because we'll actually use this in the end, please don't try to rinse this off and save it and then move on to using it for paint. That really does not create a good product. That's why we provide an extra brush. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm just gonna start with a little bit of paint on my brush, and we're gonna start working in kind of a tapping motion up and down all over the letters. Again, we're just doing it very light. We're not doing it too much. Okay, so we're just gonna keep doing this all over the board. And I know this sounds goofy to do it this way, but this actually helps to create more of a balanced paint across the board. And it actually helps get better coverage. You are provided with plenty of paint, so don't worry about running out. I'd make sure that each cup of paint has plenty that you will receive. And when you do order the kits, I do send the paints in a different container. They actually come in a little plastic cup with a screw-on lid, and it actually has a piece of plastic over it before I put the screw-on lid in, so I ensure that the paints stay nice and secure for shipping, because the last thing that I would want is you to get a beautiful board with paint splattered all over it. That would be quite the disaster. And I have shipped as far as California and Arizona, so I know that my signs get there in good shape. I do have people that have told me that they make the kits get there in great shape with absolutely no problems. So again, we're just dabbing and we're going over the design, and then we're just gonna kind of work it back and forth. I will caution you, the only thing I would recommend is, I know I'm guilty of it, is when you have a white edge, just be cautious of where you're painting, so then that way the black paint doesn't end up on the edges of it. But if it does happen, don't worry. I actually have that little razor that we talked about at the beginning of the video. You can actually take that and just scrape along the edges and it comes right off. So don't sweat that, don't panic if that does happen. So again, we're just tabbing over. Here's that tricky M we're gonna get to. I wanna show you what I mean when I say going with the grain, or going with the way of the stencil. So we're just gonna do half of it, we're gonna work it up, We're going to dab the other end and we're going to work it down. Okay, and we're going to kind of paint over it till it's nice and smooth. Gets a nice clean, smooth edge. And you will have to do the coat of paint if you want a nice, very solid paint product. I will say you will have to do between 2 to 3 coats of paint, just depending on your preference. I usually do about, it's hard to say, just depends on the design and the client request. I usually like my signs personally with about 3 coats of paint, and the reason that we do 3 coats of paint, I know that sounds like a lot, the reason that we do is because when you're working with a stencil, you don't want to overload the stencil. That's how you get bleeding and things underneath the stencil work. So doing more coats of paint is, honestly, it's a better way to do it because you get a better product in the end versus trying to rush it and put a whole bunch of paint on here. I mean, we've gotten this far in the process, let's not rush it now. So I will say, if you are enjoying this video and this is helpful to you, I'd love to hear your comments either below here on the YouTube video, or you can actually leave a review for me on my website at www.riseandshinewoodsigns.com. I would love to have you guys like, share, and tag us in the reviews about how easy the process is, the tutorials, what you guys think about the product and about the process. If there's something I can do differently to help you guys, by all means, please tell me. I would love to hear the feedback. And yes, I am just wiping gently after I kind of blotted it on, because we're just going over it. As you notice, I am covering most of the letter first, and then I am just gently kind of brushing the paint back and forth. I'm not dragging the paint all around to the letter from another part of the letter. I'm brushing it on there from the paint that I've already put on there. That is so important. And I know it seems funny and tedious and you just kind of want to go put it all on there, but that is really not the way to go. And sometimes tapping up and down in the brush instead of just adding more paint to it actually works. You notice I haven't redapped my brush since I was down here working on the word dogs. There is plenty of paint in these little foam brushes. They are little sponges. They hold lots of paint. This is a very high quality chalk paint, so you really do not have to worry about not having enough, because this stuff goes so far. Even lean your brush a little bit to the side, work it in there. Look at all that. That is a lot of paint on there. And I did all of this by the dogs, or OGS, in the 2 paws without redipping my brush. So trust me when I say there's plenty of paint. Now, this up here you can clearly see is 1 coat. The beautiful thing about chalk paint is it's dry to the touch. If you do a light enough coat, you can go right back and do the 2nd coat. You can see where the paint is obviously still wet down here where I just did it, but this paint up here, it's all completely dry. So we'll go ahead and do the 2nd coat. I'll touch back with you when I am done with this coat. So I want to give you a couple of pointers when you're doing your 2nd coat of paint. Now, as you can see, the paint is obviously a little bit thicker on the board. Okay, so that's what we're working with. But what the pointer that I want to give you is when you're working with chalk paint, you have these spaces in between your words naturally, because that's your sign. But when you're painting, you want to make sure that you're not painting over basically the letters down here at the bottom. When you're brushing up, you want to make sure that you're not hitting the letters of the other row right above it or right below it, because what happens is you kind of get like brush marks, and they tend to get extra layers of paint on there when you've worked so hard to keep all of your lines so straight. So that's one little tip that will help you keep your sign looking extra crisp and extra professional. And we all know that's what we want for our DIY kits. Since we've taken the time and invested the money into this kit, we want to make sure that we get a really great product. The other point that I want to remind you of is to make sure that you're dabbing the paint on and you're not just grabbing a big blob and brushing it on there, because that is not what you want to do. Continue the dabbing even through coats. Paint 1, 2, and 3 if you decide to do a third coat and that's what you like. My third and final tip for doing this when you are working with is to make sure that you get all the little pieces, if there are little pieces on the edge, little dots, a lot of different designs that you guys can choose from, but I want to make sure that you're getting all of your pieces covered, because there's nothing worse than getting the stencil off of it and realizing that you forgot the top half of the A because you didn't see it. So really take your time, don't rush through this, do it right, and make sure that it's exactly what you want. So I'm gonna let this second coat finish drying, and then we'll get back together ready for that to peel the stencil off after this third coat of paint, and I'll show you what we've got. Final coat of paint on this. All right, 3 coats in, we have a fully covered board. This is probably what yours will look like as well when you're doing your project. So now we're going to get to tearing this stencil off, and I'm going to show you exactly what to do and a few pointers along the way. So first, again, we're going to start with the corner, and as you notice, this comes off very easily. Now I will tell you one quick pointer. Before you rip off your stencil, you want to make sure to give your sign at least a good 5 to 10 minutes to dry, if not a little longer, just depending on how you put your paint on and how many different colors you have, because you want to make sure that paint is fully dried. If you're trying to pull the stencil off while it's wet, you're going to have a hot mess on your hands. Please do not do that. Please make sure that your paint is fully dry, and honestly, a good 10 to 15 minutes to let the paint cure is going to be your best bet. It just lets everything harden up before we rip off the stencil, because we want a nice, clean, crisp, clear lines. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna lift up the stencil, and you guys can use your razor blade that is in the kit. Yours actually has the square edges, or you can use your pick if you'd like, if that makes it a little easier for you. And as you start to pull away the letters, you just want to kind of lift them up and away. So you'll start to see the letters coming apart, and you can start just wedging your pick underneath the stencil and lifting that up. You just want to go nice and slow. It's not a race to get this off. You don't get a big prize at the end, but you do get to see your beautiful sign. So we want to make sure that we get it exactly how we want it. Okay, I'm just going to go nice and slow. We're going to keep working, especially on your open letters like the G or the S and the U. We want to make sure to get underneath there. Okay, so here's that M that we want to lift up. That you can actually lift up those little pieces and pull underneath there. Now, of course, on the letters that have like an A or a B, you're still going to see those letters. Okay, we're just trying to work down row by row. Okay, look how beautiful these lines are on this. Everything is so crisp and so clear. We're just going to get underneath there. And working row by row, this actually allows you to not just have a bunch of miscellaneous pieces where you're going to have a bunch of pick marks. Just going nice and slow and working with the stencil film, pulling it as you're working is going to be your best bet. Again, we're just working around those letters and the paw prints. Now we're getting to the end. We're just going to stick our pick underneath there and lift that up. You can even use your fingers and pull it if so. Okay, now, that was pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna lift up the letters. If you want to use your razor blade, this gives you a little bit more of an edge, so then that way you're not using your pick and actually digging in and picking, but you're more than welcome to. So what I will advise is you don't want to scratch, but you really want to lift. I'm going to use my razor blade because that's what I'm used to working with. So I'm just going to work up the corner of it, very lightly, lift it up, peel away. Now just please be careful because you have to remember you are working with a razor blade. And you're really just looking to get the edge of the material and the thickness of the material to pull it away from. You don't want to dig into the board. That's not what the objective is here. Think of it kind of like a splinter that gets underneath your fingernail. You're not looking to dig into your finger, you're looking just to dig underneath the actual splinter and be able to lift it up. That's the best way that I can try to describe to you is what we're doing here. You don't want to pick at your sign. You don't want to dig into the board because then you get these ugly little divots and really nobody wants that. Okay, we're just finishing up these last few letters here. I love, this is my favorite part of the entire process, is peeling off all of this stencil work and seeing the beautiful design left behind. Got a few more to go. All right, we are almost there. 2 more pieces and we are done. Remember, just barely underneath it. Just grab a small corner. Perfect. We're gonna grab all of this, throw this in the garbage, and we're gonna look over our design. If you have a small paper towel or something that you wanna run over your sign just to break away any little loose pieces of paint, you're more than welcome to. Now, I'm gonna hold this up, give you guys a close-up of exactly what this looks like. So all of the letters and all of the paint actually looks very, very clear. Sorry, I'm looking around to see if you guys can see it. How beautiful is that? So now that we are all done with our sign, I'm going to go ahead and attach a sawtooth hanger to the back. I'm going to put the frame on and I will show you guys the finished product here in a moment. Hey guys, we're back with our finished product. Doesn't this look absolutely beautiful? This is a solid wood frame on this fully finished sign. Again, the size of the board is a 12 by 16, and then it does add about an extra ½ inch on each side. So this would be a 13 by 17 fully framed size sign. This is a great size sign for your wall or any other home decor. As you can see, I do have some signs behind me. This one, 12 by 16, is a relatively really great size for your home, for your signs, and I cannot wait to have you guys as a part of my paint party or see you online with my DIY kits and you guys doing this at home. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for following along.